If the rent is too cheap, there's a reason. Everyone told me that when I started hunting for an apartment in Tokyo. Watch out for the catch, my older coworkers said. Tiny, noisy, thin walls, no sunlight, horrible neighbors, bad mold, ghost, something. They always added ghost as a joke, after a laugh. So when I saw the listing, 2DK, 10 minutes from the station, shockingly low rent, I assumed the catch would be something ordinary. Maybe the building was old. Maybe the toilet was still the squat kind. Maybe the neighbors played loud music all night. I never thought the catch would be the floor plan itself. The listing photo was a grainy rectangle, a gray, two-story house squeezed between two newer buildings. It looked tired but not terrible. The floor plan image below it caught my eye. 2DK, it said, 2 rooms, dining/kitchen. On the diagram, the rooms were labeled in neat katakana and numbers. Entrance. DK 6.0 dining/kitchen, 6 tatami. 6.0 Japanese room, 6 tatami. 4.5 Western room, 4.5 tatami. Bath/toilet. But the layout was off. The entrance led to a short hallway, which turned left into the kitchen, which opened into the Japanese room. The small Western room was drawn adjacent, supposedly connected by a sliding door. And then there was a strange, sliver-shaped space along one wall, barely wide enough to be a corridor, marked only with a faint gray shading. No label. No measurement. Like the program that generated the plan didn't know what to call it. The real estate agent, a thin man in a suit that didn't quite fit, smiled when I pointed at it. "Ah, that part is storage, maybe," he said. "Old houses are like that. The drawing is not perfect." "Is there a photo?" I asked. He shook his head. "No inside photo, sorry," he said quickly. "The current tenant still lives there. But he is moving soon. Very quiet man. No trouble." The rent was half of what my friends were paying for smaller, newer places. I was starting a new job and didn't want to throw my salary away on rent. I signed the papers that day. If I'd spent 5 more minutes looking at that floor plan, I might have noticed something else. The little outline of the building's exterior didn't match the interior walls. If you traced the outer rectangle with your finger and then tried to fit the rooms inside, there was space missing. A gap between the reality the house took up in the world and the shape it presented on paper. A place where something should be, but wasn't. The first time I went alone, key in hand, the house felt older than in the photo. The steps up from the narrow street were cracked. Moss grew between them. The mailbox was stuffed with flyers. I unlocked the door, calling a hesitant Sumimasen, out of habit, even though the agent had told me the previous tenant had already moved his stuff. The air inside was stale. Not exactly moldy, just still. Like no one had opened a window in a long time. The entrance was small. Shoes off. I stepped onto the slightly soft flooring and looked down the hallway. To the left was the kitchen, with its old metal sink and yellowed cabinets. Straight ahead, a paper sliding door led into the Japanese-style room, where a bare bulb hung from the ceiling. To the right, a narrow corridor led toward the bathroom. Everything looked normal at first glance. Cramped, sure, and dated, but normal. It was only after I'd walked through each space that I realized something was wrong. I stood in the kitchen doorway, mentally overlaying the printed floor plan in my mind with what I had just walked. Entrance. Left turn. Kitchen. Japanese room beyond. The small Western room, according to the plan, should have been directly on the other side of the wall from where I stood, sharing a wall with the Japanese room, with a sliding door between them. In reality, when I opened the sliding paper doors from the Japanese room, I saw only another wall. Blank. No Western room. No window. No anything. I frowned, went back into the hall, and tried to find another door. There wasn't one. The only doors were entrance, bathroom, Japanese room, and a small door under the stairs leading to a closet. I went back to the Japanese room and counted my steps. The floorboards creaked softly under the tatami. When I reached the wall that was supposed to open into the western room, I pressed my palm against it. It felt slightly hollow. I knocked. A dull, double sound. As if there was space back there. Old houses are like that, the agent had said. Storage, maybe. I crouched and looked closely. At the base of the wall, where tatami met wooden frame, there was a line of tiny nail heads, newer and shinier than the rest of the aged wood. Someone had sealed the wall recently. I thought about storage. About the unlabeled gray sliver on the floor plan. I told myself there was probably just a narrow storage space between rooms and the drawing was sloppy. I decided I'd ask the agent about it later. I moved in that weekend. For the first few days, the house was just old. The floor groaned when I walked. The bathroom mirror had a crack in the corner that warped my reflection. The rain sounded loud on the thin roof. My new routine distracted me from the oddness. Wake up. Train. Office. Train. Convenience store. Home. Eat alone at the low table in front of the TV. Scroll my phone in the Japanese room until my back hurt. Sleep on the futon. Repeat. It was only at night, lying in the dark, that I sometimes had the thought. What is behind that wall? The first answer I gave myself was, nothing. Just insulation. Maybe old pipes. The second answer, the one that slipped in when I was too tired to push it away, was someone else's life. It started with mail. On my third evening there, I came home to find a stack of envelopes and flyers pushed through the mail slot. I picked them up lazily, flipping past coupons and restaurant menus. In the middle of the pile was a thick, cream-colored envelope with no printed company logo. The address was my new one. The name was not Yamamoto Yuki. I turned it over. No return address. Just a small, embossed symbol at the back flap, a house outline, like a logo. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a printed letter in polite Japanese. Dear Ms. Yamamoto, we hope you are settling well into your new home. As requested, we have attached a copy of your previous floor plan and the notes from the renovation that was completed before your move-in. My eyes skimmed, then froze. Previous floor plan. I unfolded the attached sheet. It was the drawing of my house. But not the same one I'd seen in the listing. This one had more rooms. A narrow, windowless room labeled child's room connected to the Japanese room. A tiny square labeled study tucked beside the western room. The strange, shaded sliver was still there, but now a faint, handwritten note pointed to it. Storage? Someone had written over it in red pen, "No door, keep closed." At the bottom of the letter, another note in handwriting overlapped the formal printed lines. If anything starts moving at night, remember it's following the old layout, not the new one. My fingers went cold. I read the sentence 3 times. If anything starts moving at night. I read the rest of the letter carefully. It was from some renovation company, congratulating Ms. Yamamoto on her brave decision to change the shape of her living space after such a painful event. No details. Just that phrase. Such a painful event. Attached was a small, stapled receipt. Demolition of interior walls. Construction of new partition wall. Sealing of interior door. Soundproofing. I shoved the letter back into the envelope, my heart beating too fast. Maybe it was some kind of scam. Maybe I was misreading. Maybe it was just for a different property and delivered to the wrong address. But the floor plan was unmistakably this house. Same overall shape. Same kitchen placement. Same bathroom. Just more. More rooms that I could not access now. Rooms that had been deliberately erased. That night, as I lay on the futon, listening to the building settle, every creak sounded like a footstep in a corridor that no longer existed. I tried to forget about it. But once you notice something wrong with the bones of the place you live in, you can't unsee it. In the kitchen, there was a window above the sink. Except it didn't show the outside. When I pushed the mustard-colored curtains aside, I saw another wall only 20 centimeters away, rising past the frame. The glass was frosted, but I could tell there was no gap big enough for a person. On rainy days, I could hear water trickling somewhere beyond it, like a hidden gutter. The bathroom had a small, high window. It, too, looked out onto nothing. Another wall, close and blank. If I leaned close and pressed my ear against the glass, I thought I could hear faint sounds. A low, rhythmic thump. A muffled voice. I told myself it was just plumbing. The corridor to the bathroom had a slight bend. Just enough that, if you looked from the right angle, there seemed to be more space behind one section of wall than there should be. The more I stared at these crooked lines, the more I felt like I was living in a house that had been hastily rearranged, like someone pushing furniture around to hide a stain on the floor. As if the building itself was lying about its shape. One Sunday, when I had nothing better to do, I bought graph paper, or ruler, and a cheap tape measure from the 100-yen shop. I decided to draw my own floor plan. Just to prove it's fine, I told myself as I measured each wall. 3 meters here. 2.5 there. I marked doors, windows, closets. When I finished, I had a rough sketch of my home. Then, almost as an afterthought, I traced the outline of the building from the outside, measuring the width and length from the street side and the tiny alley that ran behind the house. When I overlaid the interior and exterior drawings, my stomach dropped. There was a discrepancy. A long, narrow strip, maybe half a meter wide and stretching along the entire side where the Japanese room shared a wall with the blank space, was unaccounted for. According to the outside dimensions, there should be more room between my Japanese room and the neighbor's house. Inside, it was a solid wall. No closets. No doors. No nothing. Just that hollow sound when I knocked. I shaded the strip on the paper. It lined up almost perfectly with the mysterious gray sliver on the original listing's floor plan. And with the red ink in door note on Ms. Yamamoto's plan. "What are you?" I murmured. The shaded strip on the page looked like an extra hallway or a long closet squeezed between realities. My eyes ached from staring. I pushed the paper away. I told myself I was being dramatic. People had lived here before me. Someone had renovated it, sealed some doors, made it into a simpler layout. Old houses are like that. The letter from the renovation company, tucked in my desk drawer, seemed to hum faintly, like a device still plugged in. That night, I dreamed of walking through my own house, except every door opened into a room I couldn't see, only feel, soft floor, wet walls, breathing darkness. In the morning, the graph paper was lying on the floor beside the futon, as if I had been looking at it in my sleep. I was sure I'd left it on the desk. The first sound came on the 5th night after I'd moved in. I was half asleep, that fuzzy place between dream and waking, when a faint thump-thump-thump pulled me up toward consciousness. It wasn't like the pipes or the old refrigerator. It was rhythmic. Heavy. Like someone was walking down a hallway in soft, dragging steps. The sound seemed to come from beyond the wall behind my head. The wall of the Japanese room. The wall that, according to the previous plan, had once opened into a child's room. I told myself it was the neighbor. Except the neighbor's house was on the other side. This sound came from the direction of the unaccounted for space. I held my breath. The steps stopped. Then, very slowly, something scraped along the wall. Not inside the room. Inside the wall. As if fingers were testing the surface. Feeling for a seam. I turned on the light. The sound stopped. The tatami looked flat and ordinary. The sliding paper doors shivered slightly in the draft. I got up, heart pounding, and pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. I knocked. Knock, knock. A second later, there was a faint echo. Not immediate. Delayed. Like someone in another room, listening for a knock that was slightly off time, and trying to copy it. I stepped back. "I'm imagining things," I said out loud. My voice sounded small. The room smelled faintly of damp paper and something sweeter, like old perfume. I didn't sleep again until dawn. The next day, I went to the real estate agency. The thin agent smiled too widely when he saw me. "How is the new place?" he asked. "Any trouble?" I almost said, "There's someone walking inside my walls at night." Instead, I pulled out the letter addressed to Yamamoto and laid it on the desk. "I think this came to me by mistake," I said carefully. "But it looks like it's about my house." His smile didn't disappear, exactly. It just froze. His eyes flicked over the logo, the floor plan, the red pen note. He tapped the paper once with a fingernail. "Oh, yes," he said after a moment. "Yes, that. Old documents. The previous tenant must have forgotten to remove them from the mailbox." "Who is she?" I asked. "Yamamoto-san. The one who lived there before. The letter mentions some painful event." "It's confidential," he said quickly. "We cannot discuss previous tenants. Privacy." "Did something happen in that house?" I pressed. "Like an accident? A crime?" His fingers tightened on the edge of the desk. He didn't meet my eyes. "Accident, no," he said. "Nothing the law requires us to tell you." "That's not what I asked," I said. He sighed, the sound small and tired. "It's an old house," he said. "Families come and go. People move away. Sickness. Divorce. Life is complicated." He slid the letter back toward me. "If you are unhappy," he added, "we can discuss moving you to another property when one opens. But the rent there will not be the same." He knew that mattered. My salary was just enough to live on. This place kept me afloat. I hesitated. Pushed the letter back into my bag. "Sorry," I muttered. "I just heard noises at night. Maybe the walls are thin." "That is likely," he said quickly. "Old houses are like that." His smile snapped back into place. "Please enjoy your new home," he added, the politeness like a wall I couldn't get through. On the way back, I detoured past my house and walked slowly around it, looking at the narrow gap between my wall and the neighbor's. There was no window on that side. No door. Just blank siding. No one could fit between the buildings. But my sketch said there was space there. And the sound last night had been too real to ignore. As I stood in the small alley, trying not to think, a voice drifted down from an open window in the house across the lane. "You live there now?" an old woman called in Japanese. I looked up. She leaned on the railing of her balcony, a laundry pole beside her. Her face was lined, her hair thin and gray, but her eyes were sharp. "Yes," I said. "I moved in last week." Her gaze slid to my house. Her mouth tightened. "That place changes too often," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "Changes?" I asked. She shook her head. "Never mind," she said. "Be sure to open the windows often. Air doesn't move well there." She turned and went inside before I could ask anything else. That night, I slept with the window cracked despite the chill. The air that crept in felt still, as if it had been waiting a long time behind the wall. After that, I started investigating. Not because I thought it was ghosts. Because I thought it might be something worse. A pattern. A history. The landlord's office, when I tracked down the building's ownership online, was a small, dusty room above a dry cleaner. The landlord himself was an old man with thin, white hair and a raspy cough. He looked surprised when I introduced myself. "Oh, the new tenant," he wheezed. Yes. How is it? Any leaks?" "The roof is stubborn." "The roof is fine," I said. "I wanted to ask, how long has the house been rented like this? With this layout?" He chuckled dryly. "Which layout?" he asked. "You are the fourth, fifth one? Hard to remember." He waved vaguely toward a stack of cardboard boxes in the corner of the office. "Plans in there somewhere," he coughed. People always want to change things. This room is too small. This wall feels strange. They knock down, they put up, they regret. Houses remember, you know. He peered at me with milky eyes. Why? He asked. You don't like it? It's just unusual, I said. The floor plan in the listing doesn't match the space. And I got some mail for the previous tenant. Yamamoto-san. At that name, something changed in his face. His mouth pulled tight. Ah, he said softly. Her. What happened to her? I asked. He coughed into his sleeve. Nothing illegal, he said. Nothing you need to worry about. She moved out. But the renovation notes. He cut me off with a wave of his spotted hand. People have difficulties, he said. She was alone. The house was too big for her. She wanted to close off some rooms. Said it felt better that way. He leaned back, bones creaking. Before her, he went on, there was a family. Parents and a little boy. They did different changes. Open walls, made more space. Everybody thinks they know what shape a house should be. They are wrong. The house knows better. What happened to them? I asked. He looked out the small window, toward where my house would be if the wall weren't there. They moved, he said. It was the way he said it that bothered me. Not as a statement of fact. As if you were repeating a word someone else had used, without believing it. He must have seen something in my face, because his expression softened. You are young, he said. Don't worry so much about the past. You have work. A future. It is only an old house. If it creaks, it creaks. That's all. I almost believed him. Until I saw, as I turned to go, that one of the cardboard boxes by the door had split open. Old papers and photos spilled out. On top lay a faded photograph of a different floor plan. The same house outline. Inside, the rooms were arranged in yet another way. A bigger living room. 2 small bedrooms. And, in the margin, in someone's looping handwriting. Even after we closed it, I still hear him walking in the narrow part. Maybe we should have left it open. The date under the note was from 15 years ago. I left the office with my skin crawling. That night, the footsteps came earlier. Not at the edge of sleep. At exactly midnight. Thump. Drag. Thump. Drag. They started near the far end of the wall and moved slowly along it, parallel to where I lay on my futon. I stared at the ceiling, heart beating in time with the sound. Old pipes, I whispered. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, one soft knock, right behind where my head rested. I sat up so fast I got dizzy. Who's there? I demanded. I don't know why I asked it in English. My voice shook. Nothing answered. But the smell changed. A faint scent drifted into the room. Something like dust, sweat, and cheap shampoo. Very human. Very recent. I remembered the note on the renovation letter. If anything starts moving at night, remember it's following the old layout, not the new one. I pictured the previous versions of the floor plan. A child's room where my wall now was. A study. A longer corridor. Whoever had walked that path before the walls changed hadn't gotten the memo. Their habits, or their pieces, were still pacing the same route every night. Except now there was nowhere to go. Just a long, narrow, sealed space, stretched along my wall like a bruise. Stop, I said, louder. My voice cracked. The footsteps didn't resume. Instead, I heard something else. A faint, high tapping, like fingernails on wood, coming from the base of the wall. Scratch. 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 I got out of bed. My legs felt weak. I knelt on the tatami and pressed my ear to the wall again. The tapping stopped. Then, very softly, I heard a whisper. Not words. Just the rhythm of breath. On the other side, someone was also pressed against the same wall. Listening. I jerked away. Went to the kitchen. Turned on all the lights. The brightness didn't reach the hollow feeling behind my ribs. I boiled water, hand shaking as I poured it into a cup with instant coffee. As the kettle clicked off, a faint rumble sounded in the pipes. Normal. Every day. Then, beneath it, I heard a different sound. From behind the frosted kitchen window. A low thud. Like something gently knocking its head against the glass from the other side. I froze. Another thud. The window pane trembled. The frosted glass made everything a blurred cloud of light, but I thought I saw a darker shape press against it for a second. Tall. Narrow. Wrong. The glass didn't break. The knocking didn't get louder. It just went on. Slow. Steady. Persistent. Like whoever, or whatever, was in the narrow unseen space had discovered another surface to test. Another boundary they weren't used to. The walls had moved. Their routes had been sealed. But they were learning. "What do you want?" I whispered. No one answered. The knocking continued a few more beats. Then stopped. The house hummed, old and quiet. I didn't sleep until the sky began to lighten. I should have moved out then. I know that now. But people can get used to anything, given enough fear and enough rent pressure. Instead of leaving, I tried to understand. If the house had been rearranged multiple times, there had to be records. Photos. Old listings. I started searching late at night, hunched over my laptop in the pool of light from the desk lamp, the rest of the room in shadow. Real estate sites only went back so far. Most had the current, simplified floor plan. I dug deeper. Archived pages. Wayback captures. Obscure property blogs. Little by little, I pieced together the house's history. 10 years ago, it had been advertised as a bright family home with 2 children's rooms. The floor plan then showed a corridor along the side, with small doors leading into each bedroom. The same narrow sliver was present, labeled simply space. Under comments, someone had written, "Strange feeling in the side hallway. Feels like being watched walking past that section." 5 years before that, the plan was different again. The living area was larger, one of the bedrooms knocked through. The narrow space had more detailed measurements. A small box next to it had a note. Previous owner advised not to place beds against this wall. Sound travels strangely. I found an old blog post from a mother who had lived somewhere in the area. She wrote in Japanese. "We moved to a bigger house, but my son keeps drawing the old one. He always puts a black rectangle along one wall and says this is where the boy stands. When I ask which boy, he says, the one who still lives there." There was a blurry photo of a child's crayon drawing. A house shape. Rooms. Crude stick figures. Along one side, a thick black bar, scribbled over and over. The post didn't mention the address. But the shape was too similar to ignore. A small, sour smell filled my nose. The scent of old tatami and dust and something faintly metallic. My eyes watered. When I looked up from the screen, the room seemed slightly off. The corner where my low table sat looked narrower. The wall behind the futon seemed closer. I blinked. Everything snapped back. My heart pounded. It felt like the house had leaned in to read over my shoulder. The next morning, I noticed a hairline crack along the wall in the Japanese room. A vertical fissure, thin as a pencil line, running from ceiling to floor. I was sure it hadn't been there before. When I touched it, the plaster flaked slightly under my finger. I imagined something on the other side doing exactly the same thing. Tracing the crack. Testing how far it could open. The old woman across the lane watched me more after that. Whenever I stepped outside to take out the trash or go to work, I felt her gaze. One evening, as I locked the door, she called out. "You're still there," she said. "Good. Good?" I asked. She nodded toward my house. Sometimes people leave without telling anyone, she said. It's polite to say goodbye. Did that happen before? I asked. With the family? Or Yamamoto-san? Her face closed. I don't gossip, she said. Then, after a pause, but I hear things through walls, same as everyone. She came down the stairs slowly, leaning on the rail. Up close, her eyes were even sharper. Young man, she said, lowering her voice, has the house changed yet? I laughed nervously. What do you mean? She narrowed her eyes. When you walk from the entrance to your room, she said, count your steps. Do it every day. If the number changes, move out. The hairs on my arms stood up. That's oddly specific, I said. She shrugged. My husband did repairs on this place, long time ago, she said. Before he died. He used to say, that house doesn't know what it wants to be. It keeps rearranging itself around whoever lives there. Rearranging itself? He said sometimes he'd leave a room in one shape and when he came back, the client had changed their mind again. Knocking down new walls, building up old ones. Always trying to hide something instead of cutting it out. She looked over my shoulder at the blank wall where my Japanese room's sealed side would be. Walls don't forget where doors were, she said quietly. People do. She patted my arm. If you start hearing someone walking where there is no floor, she added, don't answer if they knock. How do you know about that? I blurted. She smiled without humor. This neighborhood has thin walls, she said. Good night. She climbed back up, leaving me staring at my own front door. I counted my steps from entrance to futon that night. 9. The next night. 9. The next. 9. On the fourth night, I counted 10. Just one more. But my feet landed differently. The room felt slightly longer. The crack in the wall had widened. I decided not to count again. The last week blurred. Work became background noise. My real focus was the house. At night, the footsteps inside the wall grew bolder. Sometimes they ran. Sometimes they stopped right by my ear. Sometimes I woke up convinced someone had been standing just above my futon, on a floor in the narrow strip between my wall and the outside world, looking down. My dreams were full of other people's furniture. A child's bed pushed against the wall that no longer existed. A desk under a window that now faced only another wall. A woman crying softly in a room that had been sealed and painted over. I started finding small physical traces. Behind a peeling section of wallpaper in the Japanese room, I uncovered scribbles in pencil. Tally marks, clustered in groups of 7. Beside them, a faint, childish drawing of a rectangle with a stick figure inside, peering out. On the wooden frame at the base of the wall, hidden behind the tatami edge, I found a name scratched in hasty, jagged characters. Yuto. On the inside of the closet door, in what looked like adult handwriting, was another note, half sanded away. If you hear him walking, don't call his name. It makes it worse. In the gap under the sink, wedged near the pipes, I found a small plastic hair clip with a cracked red butterfly. When I held it, the air around me seemed to thicken with the scent of someone else's laundry detergent and cheap floral body spray. Little lives. Little pieces. All crammed into the changed shape of the house. All leaking through the walls. The more I found, the more I wanted to know. Who had Yuto been? Why had Yamamoto wanted the room sealed? What had the painful event been? It felt like reading a book with missing chapters, trying to guess the plot. I didn't notice how much time I was spending with my ear pressed to the wall, listening. You can get used to anything. Even someone else's footsteps. On the night it finally happened, it was raining. Rain always made the house feel smaller. Water drummed on the roof, trickled somewhere in the inaccessible gap behind the walls, whispered in the pipes. I was sitting at the low table, my laptop open, the renovation letter and scribbled floor plans spread around me like a detective's caseboard. The graph paper with my measurements had a new line now, another, even narrower strip shaded along a different wall. The space that didn't exist had expanded. Or the interior had shifted. I didn't know. I was tracing the outline with my fingertip when the lights flickered. Just once. Off. On. The screen flickered too. For a moment, my desktop wallpaper, blue sky, white clouds, was replaced by something else. A corridor. Narrow. Dim. Wooden floor, scuffed and worn. A long, featureless wall on one side. As I watched, a shadow moved along it. Not a separate shape. Just a darker stain sliding slowly down the hall, as if something on the other side of the wall were pacing. Then the image blinked back to my normal wallpaper. My heart pounded. I stared at the empty screen. A drop of water fell on the graph paper. Another. I looked up. The ceiling was dry. The rain sound was outside, not in. But the drops kept falling, dark spots blooming on the paper. They were landing in a straight line, as if dripping through an invisible crack in the air itself, right along the shaded strip. I stood up slowly. The house hummed around me. Past and present overlapped in the drum of rain and the faint, muffled thud of footsteps. Someone was walking. Not inside my room. Not outside on the street. In the narrow space that shouldn't exist. Following a route that the walls used to allow. Finding a way back. Without thinking, I went to the Japanese room wall and laid my palm flat against it. The plaster felt cold. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, very gently, something pressed back. A hand, the size of a child's, fingers splayed. We stood like that, separated by a few centimeters of plaster and decades of renovations. I couldn't tell whose hand was colder. Yuto? I whispered, before I remembered the warning. The air temperature dropped. My breath puffed white. From the other side of the wall, a small, desperate voice hissed. Don't call me. He'll hear. Who? I whispered. The answer was a sound, not a word. A dragging, heavy, deliberate step further down the wall. Another. Much larger. Like an adult pacing the same corridor, catching up. The small hand on the wall vanished. Something else took its place. A larger palm, flat and firm. The wall bulged slightly under the pressure. My nerve broke. I stumbled back. The light fixture rattled as if something massive had slammed against the other side. The crack in the wall widened with a dry, tearing sound. Thin lines branched from it, reaching out like fingers. Rain pounded harder on the roof. The house groaned. From the kitchen window, a muffled thud. From the bathroom, a soft scraping. It felt like all the sealed doors and removed corridors and erased rooms were waking up, remembering their old shapes, pushing against the cuts that had been made. I grabbed my phone. My bag. My keys. I ran to the entrance. As I pulled the door open, an impulse seized me. I turned back, just for a second. The Japanese room was dim. The crack in the wall looked like a dark mouth, slightly open. From deep inside it, I thought I saw movement. Not a shape. A perspective. Like looking down a corridor that had no place to go. For a moment, the house felt bigger inside than it was outside. More rooms than should fit. More lives than could have lived here. Then the rain-laden air from outside rushed in and the feeling snapped. I stepped out onto the wet step and closed the door behind me. The moment the latch clicked, the sound stopped. No more footsteps. No more scraping. Just rain, steady and ordinary. The old woman across the lane stood under her balcony roof, watching. You're leaving, she said. For tonight, I said. She shook her head. It's better if you don't go back, she said quietly. I can't just move out, I said. I don't have money for another deposit, another key fee. She cut me off with a sharp gesture. Young people, she muttered. Always thinking money is the only thing that keeps you somewhere. Then what is it? I asked. She looked at my house. At first, I thought it was guilt, she said. The way people changed the rooms after that boy. Everyone trying to rearrange the past. Hide the shape he left. But the more they changed, the stranger it felt. Like the house itself started wanting to keep people who knew too much about the old plans. She met my eyes. If you've started drawing it, she said, nodding toward the graph paper sticking out of my bag, if you've started matching the walls to the lives, it might be too late to leave cleanly. I laughed harshly. What does that even mean? I asked. It means, she said softly, that some houses need a previous resident to explain the weird layout to the next one. Someone to leave notes under the wallpaper and messages in the closet. Someone to be the reason the rent is so cheap. Like Yudo, I said. Her gaze flickered. You saw his name, she said. Not a question. And Yamamoto, I added. And the family before that. And your husband. She sighed. My husband told them to tear it down, she said. Years ago. Said some cuts you can't patch. But the owner didn't want to lose the investment. So they moved walls instead. Shifted doors. Pretended the narrow place wasn't there. She looked at me with something like pity. The narrow place is still there, she said. And it's hungry. Thunder rolled in the distance. I stood there, shivering, my bag heavy on my shoulder. You can stay at my place for tonight, she said abruptly. I have a sofa. It's not much. But my walls are honest. They don't hide extra corridors. Pride told me to refuse. Fear made me nod. I followed her upstairs, my own front door closed behind me. As we climbed, the corridor in my mind, the one along the sealed wall, stretched and stretched, trying to keep pace. I didn't sleep well on her sofa, but I slept. In the morning, sunlight made everything look smaller. Safer. I thanked her, bowed too many times, and told myself I'd go back just to grab essentials. Clothes. Documents. Laptop. Then I'd talk to the landlord. Maybe I could negotiate an exit. Maybe I'd convince myself I'd imagined it all. The key felt heavy and cold in my hand as I stood before my door. The metal lock was the same as always. The wood around it looked different. Swollen. As if the house had breathed shallowly all night, trying to inhale me back. Just get your stuff, I told myself. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was different. Fresher. As if someone had opened the windows. I kicked off my shoes, heart pounding, and walked down the hall. 1, 2, 3. I stopped counting. My body remembered the rhythm even if my mind refused. The kitchen looked normal. Sink. Fridge. Cheap shelves. The bathroom looked the same. The Japanese room. I slid the door open and stopped. For a second, my brain refused to process what my eyes saw. The room was larger. The proportions were wrong. The wall where my futon had been was further away. The crack was gone. In its place, there was a door. A simple, wooden door, painted the same color as the wall, with a silver handle. It looked so natural that if I hadn't stared at that blank wall for weeks, I would have thought it had always been there. My heart thudded. I stepped inside. The tatami was new in some places, patched in others. The low table sat where I'd left it. My futon was folded neatly in the corner. The door waited in the opposite wall, patient. I knew, with a deep, bone-level knowledge that did not feel like my own, that behind that door was the narrow space. The long sliver. The missing corridor where footsteps had paced. The ghost of all the rooms that had been cut away. Somewhere in that strip had been a child's room. Somewhere else, a study. A place where someone had cried, scratched tallies into wood, decided which walls to knock down. Somewhere in there walked the shadow of every previous resident who had tried to rearrange the house around their fear. The door shivered slightly, as if something on the other side had leaned against it. Testing. Feeling how solid it was. For a moment, I thought I heard a small voice whisper, "Don't open it." I thought of Yuto's name scratched into the floor. Of the tally marks. Of Yamamoto's renovation letter, with its polite congratulations and red ink warnings. If anything starts moving at night, remember it's following the old layout, not the new one. What was the old layout now? Which version? How many times could you cut and stitch the same space before it forgot which shape was safe? My hand rose toward the handle. My fingers brushed the cold metal. I had a choice. I could step back, leave, refuse. Or I could open it. See for myself. Understand. Become part of the house's story instead of just reading it. I thought of the old woman's words. Some houses need a previous resident. Someone to leave clues. To map the impossible corridors. To warn whoever came next. Maybe, I thought, I could be the one who finally documented it properly. Who drew the last floor plan? Who convinced someone to tear it down? All I had to do was see what was behind the door. My fingers tightened. The handle turned easily. The latch clicked. A thin line of darkness appeared along the frame. No light from inside. No airflow. Just the heavy, expectant silence of a place that has been waiting a long time to be acknowledged. From deep within, faint at first, then closer, came the sound of footsteps. Small ones. Bare feet on wood. Pacing toward the door. Behind them, a heavier tread. Measured. Patient. The hallway inside did not exist on any plan. Not my graph paper. Not the renovation letters. Not the landlord's boxes. But as the darkness breathed out to meet me, it felt horribly, intimately familiar. Like a route I had walked 1,000 times in dreams. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered what it meant to still have signals from outside. From the part of the world where houses obey geometry and previous residents leave willingly. I stepped back. Let go of the handle. The footsteps stopped just on the other side. Close enough to feel. Far enough not to see. I didn't close the door. I didn't open it further. I turned around, picked up my bag, grabbed the essentials I could reach without turning my back on that wall, and walked out of the house. I locked the front door. Dropped the key through the landlord's mail slot that afternoon. I never went back. People sometimes ask me why I left such a cheap place. I say bad insulation or mold or weird neighbors. I don't say. The floor plan didn't match the lives inside it. I rented a newer, smaller apartment farther out. Higher rent. Lower ceiling. Straight walls. No slivers of mystery. It's been months. I still have the graph paper. The plans. The letter addressed to Yamamoto, with its red ink warning. Sometimes I spread them out on my new, normal table and trace the shapes. Exterior outline. Interior rooms. The shaded slivers. The impossible gaps. Every time I do, the layout looks different. Rooms seem to shift. A door appears where I remember none. A corridor stretches a little longer. Memory is like that, I tell myself. Unstable. But sometimes, late at night, when my eyes are blurry and the lines on the page wobble, I notice something else. There's a new note, in handwriting I don't recognize but somehow know is mine, scribbled on one of the floor plans. No door here before. They added it for me. Below it, in smaller letters. If you find this, don't try to fix the plan. Leave. Tear it up. Don't become another room. I don't remember writing it. But my finger fits exactly into the smudge where someone pressed too hard and the ink smeared. When I lie down to sleep in my perfectly ordinary, badly insulated, overpriced apartment, I sometimes hear faint footsteps. Not in my walls. Not in my hallway. Far away. pacing along a corridor that shouldn't exist in a house I technically no longer live in. I imagine a new tenant, someone young like me, happy to find cheap rent on an old place. They'll get used to the creaks. They'll stop noticing the missing meter between the walls. They'll wonder about the sealed door, if it's there again, or the blank wall, if it's been patched. One day, they'll find a scrap of paper in a drawer, or a note under the wallpaper, in a handwriting that looks oddly like their own, warning them about the narrow space. And they'll have a choice. Open the door. Or become the reason it's sealed. If you ever move into a house whose floor plan doesn't quite add up, where the exterior measurements and the interior space disagree, where there's a long, thin part labeled only as storage, where the landlord won't answer questions about past tenants, do yourself a favor. Don't redraw it. Don't go looking for the missing rooms. Don't try to be the one who finally understands. Because some houses aren't meant to make sense. They're meant to collect the people who think they can fix them. And somewhere, in a narrow strip of space between what's on paper and what's real, there's always room for one more previous resident.